Welcome to the Coach Speak podcast, built for coaches, by coaches, hosted by Jamie Bolton and Dustin Martin, sponsored by Ray Crowther, providing athletic training equipment since 1932, helping you dominate with fundamentals.
Coaches, welcome back to Coach Speak. Today's a very special episode. We have a special guest, Dub Maddox, with us. Dustin's going to introduce him in a second, but first we want to talk about our sponsor for today, Pro Quick Draw. So Pro Quick Draw is a powerful playbook platform that helps coaches save time by creating templates and playbooks and all sorts of things that you may need. But Dustin, go ahead and introduce our guest today, and we'll get started.
Yeah, man, a very special friend of mine, Mr. Dub Maddox. You know, you probably know of him from the R4 football system. You know, great system he's came up with. He's a book author, and he also you know him as an offensive coordinator, has some head coach experience as well. So we're super excited. So Dub, welcome. Appreciate you being on.
Jamie, Dustin, appreciate you guys having me on.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So today, guys, we're going to learn a little bit about Mr. Coach Maddox here, and then get into some spring ball off-season stuff, and then talk about the R4 a little bit. So Dub, just kind of give us a little brief overview, who you are, where you've been, and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, originally from Oklahoma, grew up around here, and you know, it's football. It's a football state, and so it was kind of ingrained in me at a young age. You know, always wanted to be a coach. Was impacted by my high school guys that coached me, and especially my youth football coach had a big impact on me. And so always wanted to be a football coach, and that's what I set out to be after college. I've been at the top three biggest schools in Oklahoma, and just finished up my 25th season. And so been around here a while, and watched the game grow and expand. And I'll tell you what, man, we may not have the caliber of athletes per capita, you know, as the Texas or the Georgias, but the level of scheme and what you see around here is very, very competitive, and it makes it fun.
No doubt. I know Coach Gaylor over there does a great job on defense. I know he has some really good things he does. I know you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, you got him, you got Big Sweet staff does a great job. Coach Montgomery there and I worked together many years ago at Jinx, and just, you know, everybody's kind of interconnected one way or another, and at some point have worked together. And so it's just a tight-knit group of guys that are really competitive, so it makes it fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, Coach. We appreciate you being on, and I've actually been a part of the R4 football system since 2017. Spencer Carroll got us on that early on, and that's really changed my career for the better. I think you mentioned in some of those modules, I probably watched hundreds of hours of that stuff, and you know, he taught you, I think I remember saying it will accelerate your career by like 10 years. And I definitely believe in that. I don't know you personally. I think we met a couple times, but I just have one big question. You know, who is your biggest influence? I know this is a big platform that you created with the R4, and I'm like, man, where did he kind of get all this? And I've read your books, but just briefly, maybe someone that had a huge influence on you growing up that kind of sparked you to maybe create your own system. Because I know a lot of guys will try to copy systems or fall into systems, but you created your own thing. I'm interested in that.
Yeah. I was hardwired at a young age to have a unique ability to identify patterns and to see how things fit together. You know, I wasn't off the charts with my IQ or anything, but there was one area that I was really, really always good at. It was just finding and understanding how things fit together, making connections. My influences, man, I've been so blessed to work under some unbelievable coaches in my career. I think of the 5 coaches I've worked under in my 25-year career, all of them are in the Hall of Fame at their respective states. And so each man has a special impact. In terms of just building systems in R4, I mean, the key guy that had a huge impact on me was Darren Slack. And many guys out there may not know who he is, but, you know, back in the early 2000s, he was like the forefather of quarterback mechanics and actually building a system to teach mechanics based on biomechanics and science and a streamlined process, and had a common language. And I ran across a set of his DVDs, which, I mean, we're getting to the point now, people don't even know what DVDs are, but he had a 3 DVD set on passing mechanics. And when I first started coaching quarterbacks, it was hard to find material on how to teach mechanics. You kind of submitted to the thought, well, you're either you were born to throw well or you can't. And so that was what most coaches submitted to. But he was the first guy that showed that with the proper sequencing, the proper coaching, and identifying what the issues are, you can make people better throwers. And when I saw those DVDs, I was blown away at the level of detail and how the system was set up to be replicatable. And I took those DVDs and went out to our third string quarterback at the time, who was in offseason. My other 2 guys were playing baseball, and started doing some of these drills. And I'll never forget, he looks at me and it was like after a week of training, he goes, "Coach," he goes, not only can I throw better, but I know how to fix it. And it's just, the eyes were big. It was like he was giving the best present you could ever give a kid. And when I saw his reaction, I said, I want to be able to give this to everybody. It was like a gift. So I called Darren up, or maybe emailed him at the time, and I said, "Hey, I want to come down and work one of your camps and just be a fly on the wall." And that's what I did. And that turned into a long relationship where we started collaborating on things outside of the quarterback mechanic world. And he really helped me build the foundational, guts of the system. And then as I got into play calling and growing in my, knowledge of football, I kind of took it from there.
That's awesome. No, I can definitely attest to Darren Slack. I've never met him, but I use all of his things now when I train quarterbacks and coach quarterbacks. So from retraction, J path, zero position, extension, flexion. I mean, that stuff is key. The lower body mechanics, we use all those drills. It really is excellent. And that definitely taught me how to train and coach up quarterbacks for sure.
Yeah, Dub, you were talking about how, from a young age, you could study patterns and whatnot. And I remember your first book, like the OG, the big one, not the new branded one, like the big textbook looking when Spencer had it. And I borrowed it from him. And in there's that quad with all those numbers scattered. And before you get to the quad, you just count from 1 up as fast as you can. And, you might get to like 15 within a minute. And then you lay that quad on there and you find the pattern of going from quad to quad. And a lot of times I've used that with players. That's kind of how I lead into the football 101. Like, our goal is to make this seem easier to you through finding a pattern.
Yeah. And I think, that is I love that tool. And that's a great exercise to go through. And I was actually thinking about that today, and I kind of forgot about it. And it's amazing to me how that process, and for listeners that maybe have not seen this, it's, a bunch of scattered random numbers. You put a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, create a quad, and you go around it. What you find is the number sequences are organized into different quadrants in order. And so I think it's a clockwise motion. So once you crack the pattern and you know how the numbers are arranged, you can accelerate in 1 minute and almost get to 1 to 99. And to me, that is always a constant reminder. There's patterns like that in everything. I mean, you can look at any kind of domain, anything you're studying, like there's non-negotiable patterns, principles is what I call them. And when you can extract those and put a language and a process around that, you can really accelerate the learning curve of whoever you're trying to train or teach. And to me, I try to take that analogy and use it in everything we do. I mean, there's patterns in the run game, there's in defensive coverage fronts. And once you kind of crack that code, and that's really what R4 is learning how to crack that code, it becomes fun as a coach, because you can have those light bulb moments like I had with my quarterback, Billy, doing those passing mechanics drills, many, many years ago.
No, it's great. I think cracking the code is something that really turned me on to the entire system. I think that's where I started to figure out, okay, I've been learning all these concepts from football, but now all this stuff just makes sense. No matter if it's like triple option or power spread or air raid, it all kind of fits. And I think that's what's so exciting. And then when you came out with what is open, that was a total game changer for me too. And because the question is, well, if you ask what is open, there's going to be 30 different answers if there's 30 coaches in the room, and so that is another pattern that I think just makes a ton of sense. And so I know Dustin's got some more questions, but no, I'm excited to get into some of this stuff.
Hey, Coach, didn't you know open is, if he called it, it was open. If he didn't,
that's right,
it wasn't open.
Yes, I've had guys like, well, it's easy to clarify. It's really not. I mean, it's easy to determine what is open after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. But what is open is really about the anticipation of open. Like, how can we predict that coming open before it actually happens? And that's the magic. Where the magic happens is when you can accelerate that ability, that intuitive ability to predict, future outcomes based on those movement patterns, in those frames of reference we use with R4. That's really where you make your money.
Have you I don't know if Dustin had a question, but just to kind of piggyback off that, I know we're going to be talking about it. These are just good questions that I think I like to hear, but I've had quarterbacks stacking into it the field pretty naturally. And we haven't had to necessarily just drill in like all the hip angle, the full square zone man hip angle and all that. But then there's some guys that, man, like we have to hammer this because they can't throw stick, like when they're like keying the skiff or whatever it is, or keying that space. Talk to us a little bit about the differences in some of your quarterback abilities to do that. And or do you kind of do it the same way every single time?
Well, we establish the frames and we establish the language for those frames every year at the beginning. But what coaches got to understand, and I think, this is where guys can kind of get off the rails and be like, well, this is too complex and this makes sense. There's really two styles of processes to teach quarterbacks reads. There's the throw it to grass, mentality. And then there's like the defender key mentality, right? Well, really what you need is you need both. And you, as a coach, like what you're referring to is like, I've had my first quarterback I ever coached had that intuitive feel just to anticipate open. I mean, he was a Division I athlete and I didn't have to give him all the ins and outs of these leverage positions and things. I mean, he just had it. But what R4 allowed me to do was to fill in the gaps on situations where he maybe made a mistake, and I could bridge the gap and create the learning loop and basically close the failure of the learning loop faster with the language in the process. So like, when I asked him, why did you throw that? Well, I thought this was open. Well, actually I can have a process, with the cap, a 3-step process to go back and layer out like why it wasn't open. So again, we don't get into these deep, like, intricate, like hip angles and leverage positions with every quarterback. And really a lot of this is done in the film room. But at the end of the game, this is a sub-second environment and the quarterback just has to, we just want him to feel it, right? But if he can't feel it, we have a process and a language and frames to go step by step and walk him through on what he should have done based on the reality of what he was seeing. And so I think that's what R4 is. It's a way to bridge, those situations where there was noise and confusion and he didn't see what he should have seen.
Exactly. That makes sense. And there's something else I think about too when you're talking about bridging the gap of like, even when it comes to play calling or game planning, it's like, there's like certain non-negotiables in game planning too. You're going to take your things in, but then you're like, well, why didn't these things work potentially? And then, because you could be a good play caller without R4, but then the R4, I think, helped me become a better play caller because you're trying to eliminate the bad play. Like, why did we call the bad play? Well, it could be we didn't grade the personnel accelerators good enough, or we didn't, have the right, we probably didn't have the right formations in the read grid or whatever the case may be. And I think that's something too that's really big with the R4. It's not just about quarterback play. It's not just about helping your offense, it's actually helping the play caller too.
Yeah, I would say my big aha moment in the R4 was year 2, I think, when I realized that, your read plays or your adjustment plays don't technically have to be new plays. They just have to be new ways to neutralize, who you're grading. Maybe inside zone is still the best play, but that 3 technique is causing the issue. So how can we neutralize, that personnel? And that was kind of the aha moment.
Yes.
Like the answer may not be a new play. It may just be, how do we handle who's hurting the play that we want to run?
Yeah, that's really good. And for me too, it allowed me to identify and ask the right questions that could, impact your base play. And I think my issue is I try to have answers for everything. And when you study other domains, like in the military is the greatest environment to study because it's chaotic and guys are under pressure. They have to make rapid decisions and there's a lot of unknowns. But you can't worry about everything that can go wrong in a situation, but you have to identify, the highest priority threat to a situation. And it has to be, no more than, 1 to 2 things. And so I think, for your adjustment, what we call read plays, there's a lot of answers that you could have, but in the heat of battle, you've got to be really down to the wire on, what's the highest priority threat and how we're going to handle it and then move on.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, real quick before we move on, you said, you got to have a little bit of both of reading, throwing the grass and defender keying. Us 3 probably, and a couple listeners might know, are buddies, but hey man, when you're running slash, the rhythm, the 15x5 and the 5x1, would you say that's more, do you teach that more of a defender key or what do you go through the process on the rhythm?
Yeah. So Well, what we've got into with my latest book, Capology, when COVID hit, I did about a 2 or 3 year study on vision. And my eyes were open drastically on just the impact of your visual system and how, like, most guys don't really tap into the full power of your visual system and how to coach that. And so what I try to do is look at other sports and how they're really training. So like other domains, like soccer's a really good one, baseball, they've put a lot more money and research into the vision and strategies, visual strategies, and identifying what elite players do well. And so what I try to do is go to those domains and try to extract what they do and pull it into football, because there's just not a lot of research from the football realm. And so what I found is peripheral visual acuity is your peripheral vision. And what you'll find is when you use your peripheral vision is the strongest when it's within 13 degrees. So like if you make a U with your hands, I'll try to fit it in the camera here. All right. So like this is 13 degrees visual acuity. That's where your peripheral vision is at its strongest. And your peripheral vision is tied into your subconscious brain. Okay. Your part of your brain that makes rapid decisions. It can process high speed movements quickly. It's what you do when you drive, right? You see something swerve and you're really not focused on it, but you make a reaction, and you can really process a lot of things quickly when you tap into peripheral vision. Problem when you teach defender key is that you're focused on your central focus, which is about the width of your thumb, right? And so when you just tap into those defender key type visual structures, you really lose your ability to tap into your periphery if you don't know how to bring them both into the same scope. Right. And so I think that's something that we really went into deep with Capology and the anchor points concept. It's something I'm talking with a lot of quarterbacks at the high levels on how to learn how to anchor your eyes correctly between functional space. So on those concepts, like the bow concept, that boundary smash, we want to anchor our eyes between that boundary corner and safety. And a lot of times if that will linebacker's, walked out, or he's, out there and you got that 3/2 triangle, you can position and fix your eyes between those three guys. You can process all three movement patterns with just in one click, and you can make rapid, better decisions on which route to hit, if any, and get off to the backside cross faster. So that's something that in the last 3 years, I've probably had the biggest jump in our quarterback's ability to make better decisions and to get off routes faster. And I actually coach it differently now. When I'm in practice in 7-on-7, I will actually snap the ball. And I'll snap the ball to the quarterback, and I'm watching his vision. And that's something I didn't always do. And I was amazed the first time I started doing that. It's just how off his eye tracking was and how his anchor points were off, and he was all over the place. When, looking from behind or from the drone view, I couldn't process that to its entirety. So he has a long answer to your question, but you just kind of opened up a Pandora's box for me.
That's it, man.
That makes a lot of sense.
I know this past year ran, we called it Hollywood. We ran it at least 42 times, if I'm not mistaken. And if the 5x1 wasn't there on rhythm, we were throwing the back shoulder 15x5 every time, because the only way they could take it away was that corner to drive down with the two high looks. But I know Bolton runs that concept, and
it's been our best concept since 2018.
Yeah, there's been a lot of third downs converted just on throwing that 5x1. I mean, I've converted a lot of 3rd and 10s because that corner sinks. And then you have that 15x5 kind of running at the corner, kind of like pushing him back. And if you catch and rocker step and get that out now, it's really tough to defend.
And it also shaves some of that will linebacker if they're kind of bumped out. I mean, sometimes our slot fade or 15x5 will run into him a little bit if he's taking an improper drop. And that's always open. What we've really done the past 2 years is hit the pipe route. The pipe routes come open a lot. And so our quarterback's gotten really good at trying to find that. And man, it's been really good for us. I think we've probably around 80% completion or something like that.
It's a great weapon to have in your arsenal for sure.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't mean to get off into the Pandora's box.
But man, that
was
question.
Something.
Great question.
Because me and Bolton were talking the other day, and just the differences in like how some concepts we feel like it leans more towards the defender key, but then some are easier to read their outside space, and I was always wondered that concept. So kind of what we'll go into next is this will be the last thing. We'll kind of hop into the off-season spring ball segment. But what was a trial that you can think of that you had to overcome maybe early to mid of your coaching career that really took you to the next level as a coach?
Yeah, I've had a ton. I mean, I've had a ton. Anything that can be tacked onto me is good, or something that I've created as good, it has come off a huge failure or a mistake. And so probably the most pivotal one for me was my first year calling plays. It was 2010. And I was an offensive coordinator at Jinx, and we had a really good senior group and just rolling through the season. We were undefeated. I think we were averaging 55 points a game. I had a 3-year starter at quarterback that had been schooled up in the R4, was shredding it, went on to play at UNI, Northern Iowa. And I thought, man, this coordinator stuff's easy. I mean, just, look on your sheet, call a play, and, racking off 15, 12-yard gains. And we're up at 24-7 at half, or 27-7 at half. And I'm thinking, man, what an unbelievable year. First year as an OC, undefeated. I'm sizing that ring up at halftime. I'm thinking, man, I'll be a SEC coordinator in no time, right? And we go out half and we turn it over the first series, and then defense gives up a big one. And next thing I know, it's fourth quarter, minute 20 seconds left. We got to drive the ball 50 to get in field goal range to tie it, and we got to go 80 to score to win it with a minute 20. I'm on the sidelines, and man, my play call sheet felt a million miles away. I'm looking at it, could have been in Chinese for all I knew. I mean, I couldn't read it. I call up on the booth and, hey, what do you guys like here? All you heard was crickets. I looked at the offensive line coach. Hey, what do you like? And he's like, man, you need a 4th and goal play. I got it, but this is your gig. I got 11 guys in the huddle. We're on the sideline, get ready to come out that P&10 possession, and they're looking at me like just ready to roll. What are we doing? And I had one bullet left, but I could feel the pressure, right? I mean, we're playing at Oklahoma State University. There's 20,000 people in the stands. And so I call that silver bullet, and it doesn't pop. And then, I'm feeding fish for like 4 more plays, and time runs out, and we lose that game. And so, easy thing to do is, well, blame the defense. Well, put it on the players. But, I've always been one to look at myself in the mirror, and I knew I let the team down, and in that moment, I was not prepared how to handle that situation. And I never wanted to be in that situation again. Man, I love the senior group. I was very close with those kids and that quarterback. And they were ones that they went through their whole career. They didn't win a state championship. They never experienced one. And I didn't sleep all night. And I said, man, I've got to do something different. There's got to be a better way to game plan and call plays, because there's so many disconnects. And it's like, in that moment, I needed help. I needed coaches in the box. I needed guys on the side where we're all seeing the field the same. We all know like what the sequence of plays are. We've all practiced the situations together. Like, in those moments when pressure hits, you need another set of eyes, or you need that communication system where, you have some help, and I didn't have it. And I wanted to fix that. So I went into what I always do, start studying. And a lot of times the answers aren't found in your field. The answers are found outside of your field of play. And so, because I would go to coaches, talk to them, what's your game plan process? What's your play calling process? And at the highest levels, a lot of guys, they don't have a process. I mean, it kind of blows your mind when you kind of sit down and say, well, they give you some good advice and here's some things we do, but no, I want a step-by-step process of how you game plan, how you script, and like, what are you thinking, play by play, sequence by sequence, series by series. And it's hard for a lot of really good play callers to do that, because they haven't built a language and they don't know how to communicate the frames of reference and the experience that they've gained over doing it for 20 years. And that's where that gap occurs. In the absence of frames of reference in a language, in a process, you can't extract and dump all that experience into you. It doesn't mean that they're bad play callers. It's just they don't have a way to communicate how they do it all, because they just know, because they learned by trial and error. They might have a talent at one area or the other. And so I wanted to figure out how to crack that code. And so that stepped me on a journey to build what we did for quarterbacks in the passing game, with how to read space and make good decisions under pressure. How can I take that framework and bring it into what a play caller does? Because as a play caller, I got to make decisions on what to call and anticipate what to call on every play, where the quarterback just really has to make a lot of decisions on pass plays or RPOs. If it's a run play, we're just handing it off. But as a play caller, I've got to do it every play. And so I wanted to figure out a way that we could streamline that process for OCs and allow to onboard his staff to see space and to see time and to see talent movements the same way. And then how do we layer out play calls in strings that protect one another and put it all together, in an if-then process that can be repped throughout the week and basically tell the story of a game plan to our players throughout the week. Where Friday night, man, we've played it 5, 6, 7 times and we're rolling. And if I get stuck, because there's times that I get stuck still, hey, I got a coach on the headset. Hey, man, hey, the pin player, is doing this, or we're speaking those same terms. Hey, man, safety's capping down on the dig. Let's go to Packer. That was never done before R4 for me. And that's what it allowed me to do. And I feel like it's allowed a lot of coaches to do as well.
Yeah, it certainly empowers your entire offensive staff. And I feel like it galvanizes that group. That's the same thing that we've done. We've taken your whole, Saturday plan and Sunday plan and tried to make it ours, obviously, that fits us. But that you have so much more eyes on the things that are important. And you don't have to just rely on huddle sideline after the fact. Like you're like in, you're talking about that chaos and trying to have a rapid cognition in that moment. And obviously the more eyes specifically looking at things that you told them to is super helpful. So
I think the moment where you really got it is when your players are coming to you off the sideline or they're looking at you and they are making the check or the suggestion before you can get it out of your mouth. And the years that we've been the best, we were able to get that, and R4 really allowed us to get it more often and faster because we bridged, that knowledge gap that was an abyss before you had those frameworks.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I know in 2018 when we were at York, Jamie was the coordinator and I was the box guy. But like there was never a Friday where we went in the game where like when he's calling plays, I didn't know 2 of the options he was getting ready to call. We were just on that same page and what it allowed. And then I remember 2 years later, I got my first OC gig, which was kind of similar to yours. And I learned real quick I was not ready. I thought I knew all this ball and knew all this, but I remember implementing the R4 that year. It was game 3. And we were just running, corner snag, and we throw a pick on the corner route. And the quarterback comes to the sideline. And before I say anything, Coach, I threw the corner off of a reset. It's got to be on rhythm, or I should have moved to the next move. And I was like, sounds good. Go get them next drive. Like I didn't have to say anything. And just the feedback, like you said, when the kids come to the sideline and can immediately tell you what's wrong, that's a complete game changer in everything.
Man, absolutely. That's the funnest part of it. And I think, there's coaches out there that are listening. This doesn't mean you can't get there without R4. It just R4 allows you to get there faster because of identifying the non-negotiables over 25 years and having a common language and a process that can be repped. And I think that's the secret behind it is just having that built out allows you to get there faster.
We started this podcast, but when we sat down and was like, who do we want to bring on? It is people that I think is genuine to the game and really trying to grow the game. And like R4, like I wouldn't be sitting here on this podcast right now probably without R4. And I know that sounds pretty cliche, but in terms of like what it has allowed coaching wise, and the reason I love it is you have a lot of coaches out there sometimes who want a quick fix. Like, how can you make me better? That instant gratification. And like, I remember me and Jamie would always tell people like, listen, look into the R4, but like be ready to work. You got to put the man hours in. You have to do the work.
It's over 200 hours.
Yep.
Easily.
And that's the big thing for me. It's not an instant gratification. It's not going to make you become a better coach in a week. But if you put the work in the off season, you will see results the next season, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was very hesitant. I was an air raid-ish guy, and I was like, man, I don't know about this, but then I started going down that rabbit hole, and it just started clicking. And now I have so much more confidence when someone approaches me with maybe a concept, or if I want to get creative and say, maybe I want to develop my own kind of style or concept, as long as it meets those non-negotiables, I feel very confident in installing that. And it's really given me a platform to work from. And I think it could do that for anybody. Now that sounds like a commercial, but dude,
Well,
I mean, it's
we
the
definitely
truth.
can thank our long-haired hippie golfing buddy Spencer Carroll, because
Carroll, yes.
he's the one. I remember it. He pushed it and pushed it, and our first year coaching together, we were 19. We were coaching the freshman and JV team. We're coaching both, and we used it at that level. And obviously, you can win a bunch of ninth grade games off of coaching alone, but man, we felt like we were the best 19-year-old ninth grade coaches.
Y'all thought y'all
there.
were something, boy. Y'all thought y'all were something, boy. Y'all are.
I think we went
hot stuff.
undefeated and lost one game, but man, it just the level of coaching it makes you feel that you're at, because it does accelerate. But so I'll kind of ask this question, Dub. Obviously during football season, your hands are full coaching, but what would you say you think like a common area of mistakes are given when teaching quarterbacks and progression?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that I've made, and if I've made them, there's probably other people that have done the same. I think one of the biggest ones that I made early in my career was I underestimated how much footwork diminishes in season if you don't stay on top of it. And so what I noticed early in my career is quarterbacks started to basically not just perform as good game. We're getting those late games during the year. And it's just his level, it's just his processing was off a little bit. It's missing some stuff, and just going and looking at his footwork is so sloppy. And just as I go back and look at my indie time and the things that I'm focused on, like I'm not even like on top of that. We're not doing any kind of drop drills, or I'm not, filming it. I'm not, keeping him up to speed on that. So I think that's one. I think your feet are your clock, and you've heard guys say it all the time. You could watch a quarterback that plays well from the waist down. You're going to know how well he played based on his footwork. And so for me, that is something that's always stuck with me, and that I've seen in my own just career and mistakes I've made. I think another one is all quarterbacks aren't the same. They're different, and you've got to play your quarterback's strengths. And I think that I tried to early in my career to basically make every quarterback fit into this mold, and held him to to these standards physically and what he should be able to do. And I think you got to really understand that every guy's got strengths and weaknesses. His brain works differently, and so you can't really there's things that you're not going to bend on, in terms of character and things like that, but how you coach the kid. Like some kids I can get on, I can yell, I can kind of be aggressive, but other kids, like I do that, and man, they don't recover for weeks. And so I think understanding the psyche of a quarterback is very important, and don't underestimate knowing what he's dealing with off the field. I'm always, making sure I've got a good relationship with my quarterback and talk to him, outside of just, X's and O's. Hey man, what's going on at school? How you doing at home? Girlfriend, whatever the case, and staying on top of those things, because if you don't, if he starts struggling mid-season or in big games, it's probably goes back to some things that he's dealing with off the field. Yeah. So that's another thing you keep him short up, and just make sure you're communicating outside of just X's and O's. To me, that's like three that kind of stand out for me, just on mistakes I've made in the past that have affected my quarterback's play that I try to do a better job of now.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. Coaching quarterbacks now, and I'll be honest. We did a cut up in 2018. I remember, of our quarterback drops, and we were just going because it was going to be for teaching tape for the next year. The pattern that we started seeing was the efficiency went way down when he didn't have the proper drop, married to the concept or married to the rhythm route, and it was just staggering. And we brought him in. It was like, man, if you clean up, let's say, all these drops, I bet your completion percentage would go up at least 10 to 15%, if not more, just because we were outside the rhythm timeline. We had to always operate off a read timeline, and then you're scrambling around and trying to check it down. It's just not as good. That makes a lot of sense.
I remember one game with that quarterback, there were 2 or 3 rhythm corners wide open in the red zone, and he throws it out of bounds because he threw it off a reset.
Too late.
Like he threw it late.
Right, and we got better at that with him, because I remember I was just doing the clinic here in Atlanta, and we were showing his stuff, and he was like on the 5-yard line throwing rhythm corners, and they were money. So we must have got a little better at it throughout the year. But But yeah, that's a good point, because my point was, look, if he takes a regular 3-step drop and not like a punch one, or then it's probably out of the back of the end zone.
Well, I remember I was at a clinic with Dub one time. He was speaking. I can't remember where it was. It might have been in Oklahoma when me and Spencer drove out. But Dub said, he said, man, during 7-on-7, if my quarterback's feet get sloppy, he's going straight to under center in 7-on-7. I cracked up, but I was like, it's great.
No, that's punch. It's like sending them to the gallows, man.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and they hate it, but I say, we will every pass from here rest of the season in the game, we're going to go under center.
Drive, cross, drive.
It's amazing how just that remedies the the issue.
One thing that just popped in my mind: do you ever, when you get a new quarterback in, they may have had their personal trainer, or they may have a different set of, maybe they continue to have a trainer. How do you maybe adjust their technique, or do you, or is it you just kind of stay with the timeline of drops? And how, just talk to us. I know you've probably experienced something like that before.
Yeah, that's a sticky subject. I mean, I try to, my quarterbacks are, if they're going to work with a guy, it's going to be somebody that I feel does a good job. A lot of the guys that my guys work with are more just, footwork guys. I am seeing though, with quarterbacks that play on other teams in our areas that work with certain guys though, and you see kind of what they're posting on social media in terms of what they're training, is I'm seeing this, this issue with quarterbacks being real flat with their arm angle, more of like a sidearm kind of Mahomes deal. And we do that. I mean, we're changing arm angles. And I think, there's certain throws a lot of throws with your RPOs need to be flat and fast. Your elbow needs to be flatter and faster, getting the ball out. But what's happening is when that quarterback has to make intermediate throws like digs over backers, seams in the hole, they cannot get that ball on the proper trajectory to drop in those zones, and the balls will sail to the corner and be picks, or they'll sail over the receiver 10 yards in the air, and they struggle making the intermediate throws. My quarterback this last year, who's unbelievable, and he's at Boston College right now, had a spell this year where he was struggling with throwing sail routes, because his arm, he likes throwing the flat and fast, and I mean, he whips it out there. His speed release is the fastest I've ever seen. So we had to really work on, learn how to get his, kind of going back old school, getting the elbow up a little higher, on the arm angle up higher on those, intermediate throws, and extending and getting through instead of being flat and fast and more outside. So, again, I think you got to be honed in to who your guy's training with, because if you don't, it's a slippery slope, and he could get some bad movement patterns, hardwired into him where he can't make the throws he needs to in a game.
That makes sense. Yeah, we have a young kid, 9th grader, plays 3 sports. He's the same way. His zero positions are pretty underneath his shoulder slot, but man, he gets it out quick like a baseball, and he's got a ton of velocity. But same thing I've noticed too. Like, it's just kind of sailing on him a little bit when he's trying to throw those intermediates. But it's good to hear it from somebody else too that's kind of dealing with some of the same issues.
No doubt. So, kind of last questions to kind of wrap up development, of the R4. When you're developing a quarterback in decision making, like when we're teaching straight mental cap, take the physical part out of it, what are the most helpful ways for the R4 that you've found that continues to change each year, that gets better? Like what have you found from a mental aspect that is the best way to use the R4 to help quarterbacks process?
Yeah, so I think you want to kind of backdoor it into this, and so the first thing that we do every year is in our quarterback school, we establish the frames of reference, the hard deck, 5 vertical tubes, apex line. We're taking them through the halo, and we establish those frames of reference in the language, and then we get into the leverage positions of the cap. So coverage is in alignment of the hips, and then the personnel, the post-snap movements of defenders. So again, we lay the groundwork, and then we'll put up certain video clips or slides, and we'll have them, okay, in this, pause the film at 1.8 seconds. Last of the quarterback's drop. Let's look at the corner, right? Again, he's defending the fade route. So give me 2 words that communicate his leverage position. So we'll do exercises like that. Okay, what hip angle is this? Well, that's a man hip angle. What does that mean? That means he can break on outside space. It means his eyes are away from me, so I can be more aggressive with the throw. There's context that we want to lay on to those pictures, those patterns that we're seeing. All right. And so we do a lot of stuff, a lot of communicative stuff in the film room, but on the field, I don't do much talking. I mean, is it capped or uncapped? That's all we're thinking about. And it's a feel. And so what it allows me to do is when I film those 7-on-7s or film the routes, individual route periods, we can go back in the film room or put the VR on and we can pause it and communicate more in depth on just what he's seeing. What I found is in my study of writing the book Capology is that the elite performers in any sport, they have a unique ability to recall in detail what they saw on a specific decision that they made under a pressure situation. So take a penalty kick for a soccer player or goalie in hockey trying to stop the puck to win the game, or a basketball player, dribbling and driving, shooting a 3 to win it. They're able to, when you have them recall what they saw, they can go in detail, paragraphs of just details of what they saw, hip angles, leverage positions, colors, movement speeds. And so I thought that's pretty interesting. These guys can intuitively have the ability. What do we do with guys that don't have that intuitive ability to recall what they see? Well, we can hold their hand and walk them through what they should have saw, but we have to have, again, frames of reference, and we have to have a language. A verbal and visual tools. That's what R4 is. And so what the CAP process and all that allows me to do is walk him through what he sees. And once we can hold his hand and walk through on how to, write out with his mind and his words on what he's seeing, you're creating those neural networks are going faster. And when you get out in the field, again, we're not talking in all these, these terms, but what you'll start to see is it's firing faster for him, because there's power in the written word, right? And we all know that. And you're right. I mean, it's, your brains operate. And so again, I think that's, how I induce R4 into my quarterback is really, it's through the classroom, film work, language, frames of reference, going onto the field, not talking much, just giving feedback after a rep or feedback. And then we can have quick conversations with the brevity codes that we're using on just, okay, what'd you see there? And he can communicate, I saw zone hip, so I knew it was uncapped, and okay, we're good. Next, and so it just allows us this leverage of language, right? And it's funny when you go to the best some of the best stories that I tell on this is every year I like going to a spring ball practice. Right? I like going to a college spring ball practice. I've been to an NFL OTA one time, but I just like watching the quarterbacks throw, whether it's scale or team. And anytime they throw a pick or they miss, I love kind of just getting close to the OC or the quarterback coach and listening to the commentary between him and his quarterback. Mm-hmm. And it's I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what level or what school, it's 2.5 minute conversations back and forth of two guys trying to describe what should have been done, what they've seen on the post route or whatever it may be. And it's two different worlds, two different perspectives. And I'm just kind of laughing. I'm like, man, in 3 words, we could eliminate this 2.5 minute conversation. And a lot of times it's funny when you go to a no huddle team, they're snapping the ball every, 15 to 20 seconds. And, they're the starting quarterback and the OC are having this 2-minute conversation over here, holding up practice, because he's upset because he threw the wrong route. But again, I think that's what R4 eliminates is all that clutter and builds a bridge to read the reality of what you're seeing.
Yeah. And follow up. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say real quick is you were talking about using the CAP, the coverage, alignment, and personnel piece. When I switched over to the dark side 4 or 5 years ago, the easiest way to teach defense and leverages in the coverage we were playing is using the halo and the quad. That was the easiest way. So, for example, we play a lot of coverages, at the past schools where the star and nickel's outside leverage. But depending on the coverage, we have 3 main coverages where he's going to be low and inside or under and inside, under and outside, or he's got to be over and outside. And using that quad and showing film and showing, listen, man, when you're an under player, you have to get beat, once you're at that mark. But just taking what is learned from the R4 offensively and applying it has made a huge difference in teaching on the defensive side.
Yeah, we don't want to share those secrets out, but there is, I've got good friends that are at very high levels on the defensive side that have done the same thing, Dustin, that have taken this. And I think, selfishly, I kind of want to go coach defense one year just to try it, see what's possible. But to me, I feel like it would be a great tool for sure.
one thing I struggled with as a play caller, I remember my first year, I became a play caller year 5 of coaching. But the first 4 years, I was always the box coach. So I was seeing in the game the exact lens that I was seeing on huddle. Well, my first year calling it, the head coach really wanted me on the sideline. And I said, okay, like I'll do what you need. And after game 1, I said, listen, man, this is not the lens that I'm used to seeing at this experience and level. So I went in the box, and I feel like my play calling got better. But like, that's one thing, I want you to tell us a little bit about the VR reps, because I truly, before I went to the defensive side, I was interested in pursuing this, because to me, like, it's easy to sit in the press box or watch film and see that the 4-yard rule is broken and a route's uncapped vertically. But that's not the angle the quarterback is seeing. And so tell us a little bit about the VR reps and stuff like that.
So again, one of the biggest mistakes, we talk about biggest mistakes I made coaching quarterbacks. I didn't talk about this a while ago, but was I was on vacation. It's like 4 years ago. And so my wife and I, we go to Cabo. So I'm on this all-inclusive resort, beautiful day. I'm on the beach, knee deep in water, and I'm looking around, and there's fish swimming all around me. And I'm making sure there's no sharks around. Once I deem it safe, I have the snorkel on, okay? Put the snorkel over me, and I go under the water. And when I went under the water, it's the first time I've been underwater with fish like that in the ocean. I could not believe how it was an entirely different environment. The fish were bigger. They were moving faster. The colors were brighter. The sounds were different. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is how my quarterback feels. As a coach, I'm coaching above the water line from this drone perspective or press box view, and he is under the water in the chaos, and we're on 2 different perspective planes. And so all these spatial relationships and these movement patterns I'm trying to describe to him and show him what open's going to be like coming in this next upcoming game are not even close to the environment he's operating in, like you said, the 4-yard rule. And so after that moment, I was like, I've got to do something better. I've got to figure out a way. And it was right about that same time, a buddy of mine, Dutch Franz, who created reps, he was in special forces for several decades, using VR training as special operators on top secret missions on how to make better decisions using this VR stuff. And he created this for football, and he does it with other sports. But I said, man, I want to try this out. And so he came to our school, and we got a system, and man, I'll never go back. I mean, watching game film, or excuse me, I wish we could watch game, but watching practice film from the quarterback's view, what we call the shooter's view, and coaching through that is a game changer. You're under the waterline with them, and you're able to describe spatial relationships of how they'll look on a Friday night. And that's was crazy to me, Dustin, is like, man, the 4-yard rule is a whole different angle when you're in that VR and you're in that shooter's view. But it was kind of cool for me to see it because I'm on the sideline when I call plays. And so it's kind of from the same perspective. Now it's back further, but it helped me just kind of visualize in a game. Like, I would get the VR on and kind of practice, and it would help me just kind of gauge on when those shots are going to come open or what I need to call on the perimeter based on those leverage. So again, I'll never go back. And I think it's an untapped resource, and it's getting ready to take off. There's a lot of schools looking at this, and it's just going to get more and more of, I think, mainstream as the years go by.
No, I think we're going to definitely look into that too. I'm excited about that. I think the technology piece is huge. Like you're saying, the 2 different perspectives. I like calling it from the field too. I prefer it, actually. I feel like I have a better understanding and a better relationship with the quarterback too in that spot. My big question wasn't, before we went down there, that not really the rabbit hole, but how often do you drill, let's say, the vision decision stuff? Do you ever just drill that in like an individual period? And then kind of when do you do that? What methodology do you use that off season and season?
Yeah. So we do it twofold. So again, one of the main drills we do are half line drills. And so instead of doing more, full field scale against scouts, what I try to do now is more, half field stuff. So take the slash concept, for example. We're gonna start with the boundary progression in slash, and we're gonna operate, that 15 by 5 and 5 by 1, that rhythm timing, and I'm gonna get 4 scout guys over the top of that, or 3 scout guys over the top of that, safety, corner will. And based on the scout plan that week, we'll have, the primary, coverages we'll see in the boundary to take that out or to attack that. And then I might throw some random ones in, just say, hey, you just go play on the snap. You guys just go play football, and just try to. And the cool thing about VR is you can capture all these primary coverage actions against 5x1 and build a library, and get these reps, consistently throughout the whole year. But from if you didn't have that, that's how I would do it. And just, we would just, have a backside stationary receiver that's the crosser, and the quarterback's going to take his drop. And if that 15x5, the 5x1's capped out, then we're going to reset back and we're going to throw the crosser to a stationary guy. Would be, kind of the drill. What we added on with that drill is I had my backup quarterback snap the ball. And so after he snapped the ball, he would give like an outside, kind of rush, just if the quarterback can feel it, just, have to feel that closure. And then when he saw the quarterback throw the ball, he would flip his hips. He'd have another ball in his hands, would flip his hips, and whatever receiver did not get the route thrown to him, because our defenders are still covering, he would try to flip his hips and get his eyes and find the open guy and hit it as like a release drill on the run. So that was a way I could get both receivers potentially a catch on the drill. Right. And it allowed my backup quarterback to get a rep where somebody's always getting a rep. So I get 2 balls getting thrown every situation. So we build out we use that kind of framework of that drill, and we build it into different concepts.
So certainly in season with that, because you're going to go into it with the game plan. You're gonna game plan the cap and all that. I love that. Yeah, we do a lot of similar things then, because we'll do like our indie period. I'll have the quarterbacks out there giving us the hip angles, and then one quarterback's catch, maybe I'm doing the hip angle, whatever that is, and then we go to routes on there, and we got a bunch of defensive players out there, and if we're doing slash, for say the one quarterback's doing the front side or the boundary side, then the other quarterback's kind of working the back side, and we really like it. So yeah, good stuff.
It could be the VR world, I think, could be really big for those reps on both sides of the ball to really, if you're reading and reacting to things. But we'll kind of move into the next segment. So, we're in the off season right now, and we just want to kind of pick your brain and find out a couple things. We just finished up our spring ball blueprint, and, just give us a little brief overview, from January to the end of spring ball where you're gearing up for summer. What does that kind of look like for you as an OC in your planning?
Yeah, January for me is really a self-scout project based on the previous season. So, I'm going through our cut-ups, our master library, creating cut-ups of and making sure, I got a series of questions I'm asking, did we have an identity? I mean, you'd be shocked at some years where it's like I'm going back and looking at our season. I'm like, we didn't have an identity. I mean, we're just a grab bag, and you say, well, you have R4 system and you have all this stuff. Well, we're all humans still, right? And what I need is guardrails. And I think that's, as the R4 evolves and we've evolved the system, I've had to put guardrails in place for me, because I know where I'm weak in my weaknesses. And one of my weaknesses is too much scheme. Right. And so that's one of the things that I'm self-studying every year is, okay, do we have an identity? What do we do well? What do we do poorly? I make teach tapes from those. So I think it's important you keep a library of good and bad within your concept, so you can use for, further years down the road for teach tapes. And then I go into like areas of interest to study. So January is really just more coach centric for me. I kind of let the players just focus on their other sports or the off-season lifting and kind of give them a break, because they want a break from me and I need a break from them. February, I look at basically we start a quarterback school with our quarterbacks, and if they're in another sport, I have it online, so they can go through the course online. And our quarterback school is primarily focused on just defensive coverage, alignment, and pressure and blitzes. I mean, we're focused on the defensive world, and I have to make sure my quarterback understands what the intent of those different coverages, fronts, and pressures are, and how do we communicate them? What's our language we use to communicate coverages? Where's the weakness? And that's our primary focus. It's not really our plays for our quarterback school. It's more about, okay, let's learn defense. And we start every year, we start over. Like, I never assume my quarterback's got it all figured out. And so I think that's important. And that's the month of February for us. March, in February, I also do a study every year I try to do a study on one or two new things. So like last year for me was a first drive study. So there's an analytic out there that if you score on the opening drive in the NCAA, I think the team that scores a touchdown on the opening drive won 73% of the games, something like that. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Looked at our games and saw that, I could probably do a better job on scripting opening drives. And what I wanted to find out is what's some of the properties that good play callers use to script a good opening drive. And so that's what kind of kicked off the art of play calling course. So that's what I studied last year. And I also did a study on PN10 plays because PN10 is important. So every year I'm going to have something that I'm going to study and go take a deep dive on. And then I want to kind of take a look on, concepts and evolutions that you're seeing, like trends that you're seeing. And it's more defensive trends for me. I want to find out what are the defensive trends. Offensive trends I could really, care less about. I kind of want to stay away from it. Everybody's doing. I mean, you got your bread and butter stuff, but if everybody's, working a certain concept or, scheme, I want to stay away from that. But March for me is playbook updates, and I scheme what I call situational silos. So I want to update our playbook. Anything that we like, we're going to put in, or we need to, dress up our terminology. But I think kind of laying out formations, okay, and building out answers within a grid based on a front and coverage structure that you're going to see from an upcoming opponent. So like everybody's got like the top 3 teams you got to beat in your district, right? Or in the state. I mean, everybody's kind of got those guys, those top dogs. So I'm going to basically in March, okay, what do they do? What's their structure of defense? And then I'm going to take my formations and I'm going to build strings out of plays, what I call silos, to answer those issues and combat those. Because at the end of the day, if we can't beat the top teams, then, what are we doing? So again, that's kind of a project I'll do in March, is kind of build our answers in March. And it may be situational answers. Like a couple of years ago, we're really bad in the red zone. So we need better red zone concepts, right? So I need to build those out in March. And I think a lot of times what happens as coaches is we wait until October. It's week 7. We haven't slept in 3 months. We've got, kids and wife and all kinds of things going on. We're sleep deprived. We're mentally fried. And then we're grinding film, trying to figure out how to beat, man match quarters, right? We can't wait till week 8, sleep deprived, and got a game on the line and figure out what's our man match quarters beater, right? I mean, we got to know. So to me, March is that time, and making sure we have those conceptual answers ready to roll. So that's kind of March for me. April is spring video onboarding. So one of the things that we did a couple of years ago that I thought the best thing, I got it from Andrew Coverdale, who, if you don't know who he is, you need to, do a search. But what he does is he makes video teaching, basically modules for his guys. And it's just like, once you make it, you can use it year in and year out. But so example, okay, hey, here's our bootleg install. All right. So this is what we call it. You have a diagram on there. And then I try to find examples of that concept. If I don't have examples of us doing it, maybe it's a new concept. I try to find NFL or college examples because kids like watching, Patrick Mahomes run it. Hey, Patrick Mahomes runs this play, whatever. So I think, and then teaching over that, so I just video myself just on the screen, screen, you do a Zoom or do a Riverside like we're doing here and just, capture yourself talking through the concept, try to make it, really quick. You don't want it to be a 20-minute deal, and upload those to Huddle and kids watch it. Hey, module 1 is up, guys. And so I think that really helped me just be more efficient in spring. Kids coming into spring understanding when we talk about the boot, and they know what it's called, they know the rules of boot, and they've seen film of it. So again, that's what I do in April. And then May, it's spring. It's just spring install and evaluation. I mean, I think spring ball for me is getting your base offense installed. That doesn't change much year in and year out. Every year we're going to have maybe, that one new thing we want to try, or that one new concept or that wrinkle. And maybe we're not sure if we like it. Well, let's throw in there in spring, but the spring install schedule doesn't change much year out. And I want to get enough, covered in spring ball. So when we go to our team camp, I need to find out what we're good at. And really it's your own player evaluation. Hey, we think Jimmy's going to be a good left tackle, but we really don't know. we might have to move him to right tackle. Well, there's going to be a list of questions that we've got to answer. And that's what spring ball and our team camp is for. And then we can reevaluate the direction we want to go in June. And June for me is our offensive identity planning and opponent breakdowns. I mean, I think, in June, we got to try to, okay, here's where we think who we're going to be. And here's the direction. Okay, we're going to be pin pull this year, guys. I mean, pin pull is our strong run. And, whatever, weak side counters or weak side run, whatever. We're going to try to establish our identity in terms of what we think it'll be. And then roll from there. And then July for us is just fall install, camp install schedule, and then position specific drill updates. I mean, for me, a lot of guys, and I want to chase plays and chase the new next coolest play. What I try to do now more of is like, hey, can we think of a better way to drill a fundamental? Can we think a better way to, a better language structure to teach a progression for perimeter blocking and different perimeter blocking rules? That's what I focus more on there. And I think that's where the money's made anyway. If you can't block and tackle, it doesn't really matter. So again, that's kind of a layout of just our off-season months up to the season and stuff I kind of do year in and year out.
Yeah, Coach. We were just talking about this off season, and one of the big things that we were talking about were like, how do you structure practice? And I'm not sure if Oklahoma is like contact or non-contact. I know your goals are to kind of figure out who your players are going to be and evaluate. Talk to us a little bit about like the ideal, what you think the ideal practice looks like, how long, and you can get a little bit detailed if you want on this, but I'm just interested to see what you'd say and how you scaffold that with install, and do you prioritize an install over development at that point with your practice?
Are you talking spring
Yes,
ball?
sir. Yeah.
Okay,
in spring. Yep.
Yeah. So in spring, we get 10 contact days. And so, you can sparse those out however you want. And then you can do up to 2 camps. We just choose to do 1. So what we try to do is have like Monday is going to be offensive day. Okay. And Tuesday is going to be defensive day. So we don't get a ton of time. And most of our kids are dual sport athletes are in track. So we don't get them until like May 15th. So like we start May 1st. So like the first 2 weeks of spring ball, we don't have like really our best athletes in terms of skill guys. Baseball still, playing potentially in the playoffs. So again, Monday's offensive day, Tuesday's defensive day. So Monday's going to get 3 days of the first week. Defense gets 2 primary. And then on the second week, it's flipped. So you've got to kind of use that as a measurement of what you can get in. And then we're out there for, an hour 10, hour 15 tops. And so, I mean, it's very, very, it goes by fast.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we were doing this year, we talked about doing is because last year, I think we spent so much time trying to teach formations and splits and motions. And so what we tried to do this year was after workouts, let's take the kids out if we're inside the weight room and let's just, 2 days a week, 10, 15 minutes, try to keep it real smart. Let's just go through formation and motion, right? Let's call out, let's get in lines. Let's call out, hey, spread Zach. All right. And then boom, everybody run, lines up and they run it. And you have like 4 groups or 3 groups, however many kids you got. It may only be 1. You don't have a lot of kids. But I think trying to find ways to kind of steal time to train formations and then split rules and then motion rules offloads a lot of stuff, time wasted in spring ball of teaching those just basics needs that you need to get your offense installed. So I think that's something that I think is maybe going to be more helpful for us to get more conceptual and fundamental things worked on during the spring.
No, that's good. That's great stuff. You hit a lot of the questions I had, but one other question that I definitely have and we'll say kind of over the off season, but really spring and summer, there's 5 positions on offense, really quarterback, running back, tight end, OL, receiver. What would you say one priority that you need out of each of those positions, that you're looking for in order to be a starter in your system? Like, what are you looking for at each position? Like the main priority, if you can break that down for us.
Boy, that's tough, man. I mean, I don't know if you can just do one for each position. I mean, toughness, I mean, is critical. I mean, linemen got to be, I think, you got to have some football IQ. It's hard for me just to narrow it down to one.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be one trait, like just the overview kind of what it takes to be a OL in your system or what you think it takes.
Yeah, I think, well, and I'll talk from this perspective. I think the first thing when you're talking about offensive line is, man, I want a center that can run. I want a center that I want to be able to pull the center. Like, I think if you have a center that's athletic enough that can pull, I mean, just think about it, he's the center line player, right? And so, I mean, if you can pull a guy off the center line, and we're seeing a lot of even fronts now, and we're seeing torch stunts where they read the center and things. I think if you can pull the center and run like center, a lot of people run GY counter,
Mm-hmm.
I think CY counter is even better against some of those fronts. And then like pin pull, obviously, if you're pulling the center, I mean, when I'm talking about, what's one trait, man, I just want a center that can run and a quarterback that can run. I want my center line guys to be able to run, and I think, and that can withstand, contact, right? I mean, because obviously they got to hold up. Your quarterback's got to hold up. It can't be, 150 pounds. But to me, I think that's one thing. I want tight ends, okay, that can obviously, handle a 6 technique against the top teams you play. I mean, that's like a perfect world, and has enough vertical value to stretch the defense just enough, right? Whether it's a play action seam or play action post, I think that's can I flex him out and still, run our concepts and still be a vertical threat somewhat where they have to honor. I think, that's a big trait to identify. If you have that, you're going to be really good and be able to do some good things. So I think, okay, well, which we talked about, a center that can run, that can pull, a tight end that can handle a solo block on an end, and that has some vertical value. I think a quarterback that can run, man, I just think that's, the magic eraser. We all know that. A running back that can catch. I mean, a lot of times your running back is a really good runner and can cut, but it seems like for whatever reason, they don't have great hands. And if you can find one that has the hands of a receiver and you can move him around, that's an ultimate chess piece. Do you have a slot receiver that is dynamic enough to stretch the field, run double moves, but can he block that star linebacker? So a lot of times you'll have that guy that's wiggly, that, can get on safety, run corner post corner, slant and go, whatever, or you match him up in zero, can just blow by you. But is he physical enough? Okay, and you kind of go back, what makes the LA Rams so good? Well, they got Puka Nacua, right? They've got those guys that have those qualities, but man, they can motion them in, and they're like a freaking fullback. So I think, that's something that you want to look for or try to mold or develop to be really good. And then do you have the X receiver that if they're going to solo you up, can you make them pay? And that's not always the case, because, every team's going to have a really good corner and every team's going to have a really good receiver. Well, if they can match it 1-for-1 and your guy can't win, it's going to be a long night. So, I mean, that's some things I look for. From a quarterback standpoint, do I have a quarterback that can be on the left hash and throw a quick out to the field, right, to the sideline of the field from a number one receiver? I mean, or can he throw a speed out, or can he throw the field comeback? I mean, like, just, you start shallow and you work deep. I don't want the defense to have to defend. You only have to defend 2/3 of the field. I want them to defend all 53 1/3 vertically. And so in high school, man, you may not have that, and it makes for tough years. But I mean, so those are some things that in the off season we're working on development. When you talk about skill acquisition or the weight room, we're trying to pack that force on, or those fundamentals on those players to create those types of guys that I just talked about that you need.
No, I love that. And that's something I constantly think about too and then that just goes back into like, what kind of personnel are you going to have? And I'm sure bigger schools, you may have, multiple tight ends. Has there ever been a time where, I'm sure you like to, your 11 or 12 stuff, but I love 11 and I love 12, but there's been times we haven't had that. Have there been times, even that's maybe an injury too, that you've had to adapt or adjust based on your personnel, and then has that really kind of taken a lot back? And how have you kind of molded or adapted your scheme to kind of fit that?
Yeah, I think I've been coaching long enough now where I've had about every scenario that you have to deal with. You've gone through it, whether it's your starting quarterback, being out for the season, you have to move a running back to quarterback and coach a kid up mid-season on how to play quarterback. I mean, it's just it's an awful situation to be in, but I mean, there's so much valuable things that you can learn from that and grow from that when that happens. But I think for me, I've had several years where we've been limited or had a key injury where you have to shift your whole offensive, identity from one personnel group to an exclusively another one. And I think that's why for me, I'm really multiple with my offense, and I want to always have the ability to be able to where if I have to shift gears or shape shift into another direction based on an injury, I can do that and not have a problem, because I've been in those situations before where it's been a problem. So everything that we do, we have a big playbook, but we don't necessarily do it all in 1 year. But if I have to go to, page 533 and pull out the 21 personnel under center package, I've been doing it long enough. We had the language and the process to execute that.
That makes sense. Yeah, that language makes a ton of sense, especially if you're running, if it's GY counter and you get a receiver hurt, now you got to go 2 tight ends, and now it's still counter, but you might have an extra gap in there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think that's another thing too, is like, like I haven't had a running quarterback in several years that's just, a runner. And I didn't have a lot of depth at backup, so I didn't want to get the guys that could run hurt. So I think, power read, love GT counter bash, all that stuff. So haven't really done a lot of that, but I have that language in our offense. Like if we ever did that or wanted to put like a wildcat in, like we have the terms there. And I think it's important for coaches that are listening to, you may not run a concept or a certain style of offense. Like you may not run the option, but you may play a zero blitz team and you want to run option 1 week. Well, we have the terms done for that and built in the playbook. So you're not having to come up with it on a fly. Like I said, on a week 7, October, Sunday, and you haven't slept in 3 months.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I think this is a good time for our this or that question. So Coach, I'm gonna give you 2 different scenarios and you pick one. So you're going into a game and you can only run one personnel the entire game. Here's your 2 options. You have 11 personnel where your tight end it can do all 3. He can play H-back in the core and you can flex him out and he still has that vertical ability. Or you can do 12 personnel. You're going to be double tight the entire game, but your outside receivers are pretty good. Which one do you think you would go with?
Well, that's tough, man. I have a affinity for 12 personnel, and so that just because I think you can really put the defense in a corner of just the things that they can do. God's formation is double tight. And then with 2 slot receivers to the field, that's God's formation. You got 8 gaps to defend and 4 vertical threats. And then if your quarterback can run a little bit, good luck, then you go out empty in that and it's a whole nother ball game. But again, to me, that's just based on the limited amount of looks that you can get in that. That's what I prefer.
I love that. Do you think that, just to piggyback off that, I was going to ask you this question earlier. Do you like formations or formation families that give you, I guess this probably goes, or do you scheme formations that give you the minimal amount of looks that you're going to get? Do you do that on purpose in your game planning?
Yes, I think that's one of the first things that we're looking at in our breakdown is once we get all our data entered, we're trying to go through there and decipher, is there certain formational looks or personnel groupings where we can get, them isolated to 1 or 2 looks, whether 1 or 2 coverages, 1 or 2 fronts. Obviously if you can get down to 1, that's a perfect world. But team defense are a lot more multiple these days. So again, that's, I think to me is like, at the top of the game plan process for me. And then that prioritizes kind of what we're going to build like our game plan out of, for the most part.
Makes sense.
Well, I think this is a great time to kind of move into our 2-minute drill, rapid fire questions. So first one, I'll go and then we'll let Jamie ask you the next one. Over the past couple of years, think back the last 2 or 3, what do you think the toughest defensive scheme you've won against it has been?
Yeah, I think it's multiple defense that play multiple fronts out of the same personnel. Can be very challenging, that do a lot of movements, a lot of stemming. It can be a challenge. And so, because it's hard to get a beat. Okay, is it going to be a 4-man? Is it going to be an odd? And they're sliding guys in and out. They have the talent to have that jack back or wheel back, whatever, that can play both. He can play off the ball and drop in space, but he also can come up and he can freaking play a 5 technique and and pack the B gap. So again, that would be probably the one. We see we have several teams that do the psycho. What I call the psycho fronts, where they're standing up those 7 guys and moving them around, and they're blitzing, 5 or 6 guys, and they're coming from all areas. Have a little bit better understanding of how to attack that now, because our head coach would do some of that, who was a defense coordinator that I worked for, was doing some of that. So I see it a lot more in practice the last couple of years. So I, over those reps, you kind of learn ways to attack that better. But those two kind of extremes would be probably the most difficult for me right now.
No, that makes sense too, especially when you think about on the offensive side. I'm sure defensive guys will say the same thing. Multiple formation families or multiple formations with the same personnel groupings make it pretty difficult to game plan. All right, so next one. What is something that you rely on right now, or your best, leadership or coaching resource, outside the R4? Obviously, those are great resources, but what is something that you've relied on in the past, or something now that you're kind of looking into? I know you say you do something different each year, but maybe highlight 1 or 2 of those for us and our listeners.
Well, the one thing I always go back to is a book called Strength Finder 2.0. Okay.
Same,
I don't
yep.
know, you guys familiar with it?
I did.
Yes.
Is that the colors? Is that they did the colors?
No, they don't do the colors. It's a you open the book and you have an online test that you take, and it basically gives your top 5 strengths, and
Okay.
it puts me categories, and kind of, to me, like I never understood, like I thought, well, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this. And my wife was a high C-level person in an oil and gas company, and they did this for her work. She says, you really need to try this. And so I said, all right. So I tried out, and I was amazed at what my top 5 strengths were. And then the book extracts what those mean. And there's one thing in the book where it talks about balcony and basements. And so for every strength is a balcony, but there's also a basement to that strength. There's a weakness. And so that was kind of the intriguing thing for me, is like, well, I got to be aware, I want to really focus on what I'm good at, because what do? We focus on what we're weak at, and we try to build those up. But I really need to go all in on what I'm great at, and then offload what I'm not so good to other people. But there's also trade-offs with my strengths that people can perceive me as a certain way, or I may be blind to certain, things that these strengths can present. So that really helped me just be a better leader and be a better, basically manager of people, and make sure I'm putting the people I work with on my staff in positions where they can excel. Because what I found is like, once we got the test back, I make all the coaches on our staff take it. And if we get a new guy on staff, that's the first thing, is they get a Strengths Finders book, and I say, hey, I need you to give this back to me. And I put their strengths on an Excel sheet. And what you'll find is that, I would, hey, you're in charge. Okay, you're in charge of the game plan this week of putting the PowerPoint together, and you're going to put all this. And what I found, this one guy just wouldn't do it. It was do an awful job, and I get frustrated. I'm like, how can he not, get these PowerPoints right and do this? And when he gave me the Strength Finder deal back, I see, well, he's wired not to be good at this, but he is really good at this thing. And so once I put him in positions where it was amazing to see how just engaged he was, because I took it as, well, he's not interested, he's lazy, he's, not focused. And it wasn't that. It's just I wasn't putting him in a position to use his strengths and to use his passions to benefit the team. So I think, to me, that's something I go back to every year and just refresh for me. Okay, here's what you're good at. Here's your blind spots. But then also, here's where our staff's good at, and here's their blind spots, and how do we, position their jobs to make sure they're fruitful with what they're in charge of.
Yeah, the school I worked at when I was a head coach, they made every student do Strength Finder, and now they went away from that, and they did like more of a color. I can't remember the name of the resource,
I've seen that as well.
But like your colors, and then everybody had to wear their colors, so you kind of knew what kind of it was like green, gold, orange, all that. But I think that's awesome. That's an awesome thing to think about, to do with your staff too.
Yeah, I'm all green and gold, I believe.
Green and gold too.
Mine.
Yeah,
green and gold. So that must stand for Type A. That's all. That's all
it does. Yeah.
So the last question we'll ask you, Dub, and then we'll move into to let you talk a little bit about R4 and where we can find your books. But hey, man, you'll enjoy this question. What's your thoughts on duo? Do you think it's a different concept? Is it cut zone? I remember you posted a graphic on Twitter I think
used
it was.
to think, you know,
Yeah,
when
go
we
ahead.
first started running duo, we taught it as it's just, you know, inside zone footwork, you know, cut zone, cutting back. But as I got into studying it, and studying video of coaches that are way smarter than me, O-line guys, and doing it, it's different footwork, and there's more of a vertical, you know, push to it. And it's just, there's some nuances that are different. And so to me, I love duo. I think it's versatile against multiple fronts. It eliminates negative plays. I think one thing that impacts your ability to score on a drive is a tackle for loss. You know, if you get a tackle for loss, a tackle for -1 yard, like the chances of, I think, scoring on that drive drop, I mean, drastically. And so, like, I want to make sure that I eliminate those situations. And so, you know, calling a good play that may not get you may not get 5 yards, but you're not going to lose one, you know, especially when you're backed up there, is important. So I like duo. He gives multiple entry points for the back. You know, I mean, he has multiple. So I think that's why I like it. I think it's good. You put some RPOs out there off of it, sets up some good play action shots. And so I'm a proponent for it.
We were talking the other day, so the way we kind of looked at it a little bit was, you know, we talked a while back, a couple of years ago, about running different schemes with run schemes with different tags to help your personnel. So, for example, you know, if we can't, you know, run a zone insert, you know, it's just something our tackle cannot handle, the one-on-one lock block with the end. Okay, we'll run zone seal as a personnel adjustment. So, you know, everybody calls duo power without the pull. So me and Bolton were just talking, I think it was last week, of how we could see duo being a benefit when your guard personnel is getting destroyed by the plug linebacker, you know, and they're keying that pull very fast, getting over the center line, how that can kind of be the adjustment to handle your personnel if they're not able to execute that power pull.
I think that's really good. And I think a lot of times we don't define the intent behind a play call.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important as we go through, like, for me, and again, this is something that I haven't done a good enough job in the past. I'm trying to get better, but hey, when I call lion, like, here's why I'm calling it. Here's what I'm anticipating, and here's what we should be looking for to take us out of it if we happen to see it. You know, I think you have to have those conversations not only with your staff, but your quarterback. Like, hey guys, when I call eagle, why am I calling it? Well, you're anticipating cover 3. You know, I mean, like, they need to understand the intent behind a play call and what you're trying to attack. And I think that's something you think, well, that's really easy. I haven't done a good enough job with that. And I think, you know, you talked about, you know, why you're calling duo, what you and Jay were talking. I think that just reminded me of, I got to do a better job of that. And I think that's something that coaches should look at more too if they're not doing it.
Yeah, I don't think you could do that enough, and I think we take it for granted because in our own minds we're like, just we already know why we're doing it. But I think you're right. I think that can accelerate that rapid cognition when the quarterback is on the same page, especially in a passing concept. But I think too, I need to do a better job in the run game with that. You know, tell our center, like, why are we running this? And that'll maybe help them identify, you know, the Mike backer faster or whatever the case may be. Why are the apex lines the edge of the box when we're on inside zone? May tighten that up a little bit. So yeah, no, that's really good stuff, Coach. And Dustin, you can kind of finish us up here, bud.
Yeah, so Dub, we know you got a few books out. You know, you have the R4 football system membership with the master class, and then the VR with the reps. Tell us a little bit, if someone's interested in getting started or wants to know more about R4, where should they start, and tell them a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got 4 books: Headset to Helmet, Adapter Die, What is Open, Capology. Each book, you don't have to read it in order. Each book's kind of a standalone, but most of it is quarterback centric and teaching progressions. What is Open is more of just the game planning process, and Capology is more of the game plan too, of how we teach, you know, how we game plan off film, and also how we teach our quarterback to read space. But I think that's a good entry point if you're not a reader. I do have 2 of them on an audiobook. I have Capology and Adapter Die on audiobook. But I think it's a good one. I think, you know, if you want to go all in with it, the master class is where I would start. You go online to r4footballsystem.com, get the master class. Everything that I've created, you know, is dumped into that master class. So I think it's like 70 different modules and courses. I got workbooks, our play call sheet. It's auto-populated. I mean, if you just want it all and want to go all in, that's where you want to go. And so I think that's where, and so people ask, well, and what I always wanted as a young coach is, where do I go to learn a game plan process? Where can I go to learn how to get everybody to see space and time and talent through the same lens? Where can I go to learn how to watch film? Like, nobody ever taught me how to sit down, like, here's how you watch film. Here's what you're looking for. Here's how you script and call plays. And so that's what R4 is, that master class. It's the principles and the process of how to get you or your staff aligned to do all those things. And it's work. I mean, it's not, like we talked about earlier, everybody's looking for the quick fix. Everybody wants to get on Twitter or X and find the next coolest play. That's easy. I mean, I have bookmarked, thousands of cool plays, but the real magic is in the work in learning how to, see, all those movements and patterns and frames, and teach others how to see it the same. And it's work, but we've tried to make it as easy as possible. But you still got to do the work. Still got to watch film. Still got to write it down.
It's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. And I don't know of another program system. It's really a system that's out there that you can get all of that from, and then be able to go back and get all those cool plays and wonder why they work. And figure out how to teach it.
You're basically, you're doing it. You're checking the work. Okay, is it what makes this play so good? Well, R4 teaches the DNA of a good play.
Exactly.
Fake flow flood, right? And I mean, and then you can make sure, well, here's the timeline constraints that this play has to operate in. Well, maybe I can't generate that timeline because, my tackle can't pull, around in 2.2 seconds like that guy can. So again, once you understand the DNA of play and good play design, it gives you a really good way to overlay that onto any play or offense and understand why it makes it work.
Well, Coach, Dustin, if you got anything else, but Coach, it's been an honor to have you on. We obviously follow you a lot, and it's finally good to talk to you for this amount of time, and a lot of great insight, not just on R4, but just in other things too. And we wish you nothing but the best in the future. As we kind of wrap up, just want to let you know we'll have all that information on Coach Maddox in the show notes, as well as r4systems.com in there if you guys want to check that out. Also, shout out to Pro Quick Draw. We'll have the 14-day free trial link in there as well, so please check that out. Dustin, you can kind of wrap us up and get us out of here, buddy.
No, Dub, appreciate you getting on. A big thing that if I had to sum up the R4, if someone asked me, it's something we talk about on here all the time, is application versus information. You could sit down with anybody and give them the best schemes of football, but if you don't have a way to teach and apply what you're trying to do, it's not going to work. It may work if you get athletes one year. So that's the biggest thing I see. Is something I'm super passionate about, and it's taken my coaching career levels that I would probably not reach for another 10 years. So we appreciate everything, and as they say, the more you know, the less you know. And even after this call, now my brain's going down these different realms of what can I find out now. But we appreciate you, man. It was an honor to have you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It was an honor too.
Thanks for tuning into the Coach Speak podcast. If you're interested in being a guest speaker on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at coachspeakpodcast1@gmail.com. And if you have a question for our Q&A segment, don't forget to submit it through the form in the episode description. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.